What if your prayers are being ignored because they no longer come from your soul? Padre Pio, the saint marked by the wounds of Christ, warned us about this. He saw it with his own eyes. Devout Catholics, good people, praying every day without realizing that their words had become cold, repetitive, empty. He wept not for the lost, but for those who believed they were close to God while drifting silently away. Prayer was everything to Padre Pio. He bled while praying. He fought demons during the night and offered every suffering as a bridge between souls and heaven. But what hurt him most was the spiritual blindness of millions who thought they were praying, but were only speaking into the air. They repeated words without faith, they asked without trust, they knelt without love, and their prayers, instead of rising, faded. This video is not just about technique, it is about truth, about the one thing Padre Pio insisted on until his final breath. That prayer is fire or it is nothing, that the soul must speak louder than the mouth, and that God listens to the heart, not to the habit. If you've ever felt unheard while praying, this message is for you. Not to blame you, but to wake you up. There is a way back. Padre Pio showed it through pain, silence, and holiness. So if this truth touches something inside you, press like as a silent act of surrender. Subscribe if you still believe your soul can be restored. And share this with someone who prays daily, but may have forgotten what it means to pray with faith. What comes next could rescue the most important conversation of your life, the one between you and heaven. There is a kind of prayer that looks holy, but is spiritually dead. Padre Pio called it a dangerous illusion. He spoke often of people who prayed faithfully every day, attended Mass, recited novenas, and yet their souls remained distant from God. Why? Because their prayer had lost life. It became mechanical, a habit of the lips disconnected from the heart. He once said that the devil doesn't mind when you pray, as long as you don't pray with the soul. A distracted prayer, a rushed rosary, a memorized formula repeated without love can lull us into spiritual complacency. And that is when grace starts to disappear silently. You think you're close to heaven, but you're just echoing noise. Padre Pio knew this danger intimately. He heard it in confessions. He saw it in the eyes of pilgrims, people who came looking for answers but refused to truly open their hearts. He described their prayer as words without direction, like arrows without a target. It pained him deeply, not because they lacked devotion, but because they lacked awareness. He taught that real prayer is not about saying more. It's about meaning what you say. It's not in the movement of the lips, but in the trembling of the soul. It's not the beauty of the words, but the brokenness behind them that reaches heaven. Perhaps you've felt this too. You've prayed and felt nothing. You've begged for answers and only heard silence. Maybe it's not because God turned away, but because your soul wasn't fully present. This realization is painful, but it is also a door, a way back to the kind of prayer that touches eternity. Comment, I don't want to pray wrong anymore. Let this phrase become the start of a new chapter. Say it with your heart. Say it like Padre Pio would have said it, not to be seen, but to be saved. For Padre Pio, the Rosary was not a devotion, it was a sword, a weapon forged in heaven and handed to the faithful for spiritual battle. He didn't just recommend it, he clung to it with desperation. At times, he would pray dozens of rosaries a day, sometimes through intense physical pain, not out of obligation, but because he knew what was at stake. But today, for many Catholics, the Rosary has become a ritual, a checklist, something to be recited on autopilot before bed or during a car ride. Padre Pio warned that when we treat the Rosary as a task to be completed rather than a battle to be fought, it loses its power. The spiritual danger is not in forgetting to pray, it's in pretending to pray while your soul is absent. He once told a spiritual daughter that each Hail Mary should be said slowly, consciously, like offering a rose to Our Lady with trembling hands. But most of us rush. We mumble, we get distracted, We say the words, but we don't feel the mystery. And slowly the rosary turns from a flame into a shadow. Padre Pio was clear. The rosary must come from the heart. It must hurt like love hurts. It must pierce you the way truth does. Because when you pray it with soul, demons tremble. But when you pray it with habit, nothing moves. Not even your own heart. Perhaps you've been praying the rosary for years, but has it become a routine? Have your fingers moved without your mind and heart following? Padre Pio wept over this kind of devotion. Not because it's wrong to pray often, but because it's tragic to pray without fire. Comment, I want my rosary to burn again. If these words echo something inside you, type them with intention, not as a task, but as a flame. Padre Pio is listening, and he knows when a soul is trying to return to its true weapon. There is a sin that hides behind good intentions, a failure that begins quietly, without scandal, and grows in the shadows of our routines. Padre Pio called it the sin of distracted prayer, not a prayer left undone, but a prayer done without soul, without focus, without God at the center. You kneel. You start the Our Father, and suddenly your mind drifts. Groceries, emails, painful memories, plans for tomorrow. You snap back at the Amen, barely remembering what you said. Padre Pio warned that this kind of spiritual distraction was not innocent. He saw it as a subtle danger that pulls the soul away from heaven while pretending to move closer. He knew what distraction could cost. In confession, he often told the faithful to prepare their hearts before they speak. He believed that every prayer was a meeting with God, and arriving distracted was not just disrespectful, it was spiritual self-sabotage. The devil doesn't always block your prayers. Sometimes he simply makes you forget you're praying. Padre Pio used to say that a distracted prayer is like a letter sent with the wrong address. Beautiful words, sealed with devotion, but never reaching the hands of God. He begged people to create silence before prayer, to resist the temptation to rush, to protect the sacred moment from noise, not just outside, but inside. Have you noticed how easy it is to pray with your mouth while your heart is somewhere else? This is the silent sin that millions fall into. A prayer said with half of your attention is not a true offering. And deep down, you know it. You feel the emptiness afterward, the sense that something holy was lost. Comment, teach me to focus when I pray. Let these words be your request to heaven and to Padre Pio. Not for more words, but for presence, for awareness, for a soul that dares to speak and listen without drifting. There is a moment in every believer's life when prayer becomes a cry into silence. You say the words, you close your eyes, but you don't feel anything. No warmth, no answer, no presence, just an echo of your own voice. Padre Pio called this the most painful kind of suffering, to pray without faith and to feel nothing in return. This wasn't theoretical for him. He lived it. For years, Padre Pio experienced deep spiritual dryness. Even while bearing the wounds of Christ, he often felt abandoned by God. But he never stopped praying, because he knew that real faith is not measured by how you feel. It is proven by what you do when you feel nothing. He warned that many Catholics fall into a dangerous trap. They base their spiritual life on emotions. When they feel touched, they believe. When they feel empty, they stop. Padre Pio insisted that this was a false foundation, because faith is not a feeling. It is an act of trust, of surrender, of continuing even when your soul is dry and your heart is tired. He often told spiritual children that God listens most when you feel him least, that the prayers offered in darkness are more powerful than those offered in comfort, because they are born of pure faith, not spiritual reward. He said, pray, hope, and don't worry, not because life was easy, but because trust had to come before the miracle. Have you ever felt like your prayer life is just noise? That you say everything right, but believe very little? That you beg God to help, but doubt he's even listening? That's not just spiritual fatigue, that is a soul asking to be rebuilt. Comment, I want to trust even when I feel nothing. If that's your cry today, let these words carry your soul forward. Padre Pio stood in that desert too, and he's proof that silence is not rejection, it's preparation for something greater. In the rush of modern life, time has become a god. We race through the day, checking boxes, surviving schedules, doing what's required. And sadly, prayer has become just another task. Padre Pio saw this long before smartphones and constant distractions. He warned of a growing disease in the church, the temptation to rush through holy things. He spoke often about the grave spiritual danger of treating prayer like a duty rather than a relationship. He said that a prayer rushed is a prayer emptied. A rosary spoken in haste loses its power, and Our Father repeated without pause becomes noise. He believed that even one slow, sincere Hail Mary could move heaven more than 50 rushed ones. Padre Pio understood human urgency. He lived surrounded by thousands, seeking miracles, healing, answers. But when he prayed, he paused, he waited. He entered the moment with his whole soul. His body bore the wounds of Christ, but his prayer life bore the wounds of a church that had forgotten how to slow down. He once compared prayer to bread in the oven. If you take it out too soon, it looks ready, but inside it's raw. It cannot nourish. Rushed prayer may sound finished, but it cannot feed the soul. It hasn't had time to rise with faith, to be filled with grace, to become real. Have you ever felt that your prayers were just part of a checklist? That you were speaking fast just to get it done? That you crossed yourself and moved on with the day, not even remembering what you said? Padre Pio cried over this spiritual poverty. Not because people didn't pray, but because they didn't give it their heart, their time, their stillness. Comment: teach me to slow down when I pray. Let that be your invitation to the Holy Spirit. Not to make your life less busy, but to make your prayer more eternal. Padre Pio knew that heaven speaks in silence, and silence cannot be heard in a hurry. Padre Pio often said that the most beautiful prayers are the ones that don't come from the mouth, but from the heart. Words alone are not what move heaven. It is the fire behind them, the brokenness, the honesty, the cry that comes not from memory, but from the depths of the soul. He once told a penitent that a single sigh of sincere love toward God was more valuable than 1,000 perfectly memorized phrases. For him, prayer was not a ritual to be followed. It was a conversation to be lived. A surrender that began in silence and erupted in intimacy. That kind of prayer, he believed, could change everything. Many Catholics are afraid to speak to God with raw emotion. They believe they must sound holy. They try to speak perfectly. But Padre Pio reminded us that God does not listen to perfect words. He listens to honest hearts. He listens to trembling voices. He listens to the soul that doesn't know what to say, but chooses to speak anyway. Have you ever prayed and felt like you were only repeating what others taught you? Have you ever felt that your prayer lacked life, not because you didn't believe, but because you didn't know how to be vulnerable before God? That's not weakness. That's the moment when prayer finally begins. Padre Pio's own life was marked by pain, illness, isolation, and spiritual attack. But he always turned that suffering into prayer. Not polished prayer, but desperate, fiery, real. His heart spoke when his strength failed, and that is why heaven listened. You don't need more words. You need more truth. You need the kind of prayer that is born when the soul stops pretending. That kind of prayer opens the gates of heaven because it's no longer about form. It's about presence. Comment: help me pray from the heart, Padre Pio. Let that be your first step toward honest prayer. Not mechanical, not empty, but sacred, because it finally comes from where it matters most. There's a particular kind of silence that haunts the soul, the silence that comes when you pray and feel nothing in return. No warmth, no voice, just a cold emptiness. It's not that you don't believe. It's that you feel alone, even when you're speaking to God. Padre Pio called this the darkness of disconnected prayer. He knew it well. In his own life, there were long seasons where he felt spiritually abandoned. He continued to pray even when he couldn't feel God's presence. He wrote that sometimes the soul must pass through this desert to be purified, But he also warned that this kind of spiritual loneliness can become dangerous when it leads to despair or routine. Many Catholics experience this in silence. They keep praying, but inside they wonder, is anyone really listening? The worst part is not the silence from God. It's the echo inside your soul that whispers, you're alone. But Padre Pio would say you're not. Even in silence, God is present. Even in spiritual dryness, grace is at work. The danger is pretending you're connected when you're not. Going through motions without ever opening your heart. Saying all the right words without feeling any of them. That's when loneliness becomes spiritual isolation. If prayer feels empty for you right now, don't stop, but don't fake it either. Speak to God like Padre Pio did, with brutal honesty. Say, I feel nothing, but I'm still here. That is the kind of prayer heaven honors. That is when connection begins to return. Comment, Padre Pio, walk with me in silence. Let this be your silent cry. He understands that kind of loneliness. And through his intercession, you can rediscover the connection your soul is longing for. Some people pray with their lips, while their heart hides behind shame. Padre Pio taught that guilt, when not confessed, becomes a wall between the soul and heaven. It's not that God turns away, it's that we start to believe we're unworthy to be heard. Many Catholics carry this quiet burden. They remember their sins during prayer. They feel unclean while trying to speak with God. They kneel, but they don't feel welcomed. This inner guilt blocks intimacy. Padre Pio warned that unconfessed sin steals peace. It also paralyzes your prayer life. He urged frequent confession not as punishment, but as freedom. He used to say, the soul that hides nothing from God becomes light. And in his confessional, people broke down not because of punishment, but because they were finally free to speak to God again without shame. Have you ever started a prayer and immediately remembered something you regret? That's not your mind sabotaging you. That's your conscience calling you home. Guilt is not the enemy. Silence is. When you ignore guilt, it festers. But when you bring it to light, grace flows again. Padre Pio reminded the faithful that God does not want perfect people. He wants honest ones. He doesn't expect saints at the first word. He wants hearts that know they've failed, but choose to return anyway. That's when prayer becomes powerful. Not because you're pure, but because you're real. If you feel guilty while praying, don't stop, but don't ignore it. Bring it to God. Go to confession. Let Padre Pio intercede for you. He saw countless souls transformed, not by eloquence, but by repentance. Comment, Lord, cleanse my heart with truth. Let that be your step towards spiritual freedom. Don't hide anymore. Say it, mean it, and feel what it's like to pray with a clean soul again. One of the most terrifying truths Padre Pio ever spoke was this: many souls are lost, not because they openly rebel, but because they slowly drift away without noticing. This was his greatest sorrow, the quiet, unnoticed loss of salvation. A soul that prays but lives disconnected, a soul that appears faithful but internally withers. He believed that the enemy of your soul doesn't always come as temptation. Sometimes he comes as indifference. You pray without urgency. You live without awareness. You sin, then shrug. You confess, but without conversion. Padre Pio cried over souls who thought they were safe while grace was slipping through their fingers. Have you ever asked yourself, is my soul still alive? It's a question most people are afraid to face, but it's one that Padre Pio forced upon those who came to him, not to scare them, but to save them. He didn't preach fear, he preached truth. And the truth is that salvation is not automatic. It is a daily spiritual decision. When prayer becomes mechanical and sin becomes routine, the soul starts to die quietly. You don't feel it at first, but heaven does. Padre Pio warned that the greatest danger is thinking you're saved while ignoring the rot inside. This is why his ministry was filled with urgent confession, deep examination, and brutal honesty. He wasn't trying to make people feel guilty. He was trying to wake them up. Because only when the soul realizes it's in danger does it start to fight for heaven again. You still have time, but you must stop assuming you're safe. Start asking where your soul really stands. Comment, "Don't let my soul go astray." Say it like a cry from the center of your being. Let this be your first honest conversation with heaven in a long time. Padre Pio is ready to walk that path back with you. Padre Pio's love for families was unmatched. He didn't just pray for individuals. He prayed for generations, for broken marriages, for wayward children, for mothers who cried through the night. He believed that a single prayer offered with faith could protect an entire household from evil. Many people think their prayers don't matter. They feel powerless, watching loved ones walk away from the church or spiral into darkness. But Padre Pio taught that when one soul prays with fire, heaven moves. He often said, "A mother's tears can storm the gates of hell." And he saw miracles happen because someone in the family refused to stop praying. Have you been praying for your spouse, your son, your daughter? Do you feel tired, like your words fall flat? Padre Pio would say, "Pray again, but this time from the heart." This time offering not just words but trust. He used to tell the faithful, "The Lord hears the prayer of those who suffer silently." Prayer for your family is not just a hope, it is a mission. It is a spiritual battle you fight daily, even when nothing seems to change. Padre Pio believed that the ones who pray silently for their loved ones are often the ones who hold them spiritually in place. So, even if your family is distant, even if they mock your faith, even if they've turned their backs on God, you are still the bridge, you are still the light. And Padre Pio is still willing to join you in that battle. Comment, "Padre Pio, guide my soul and my family." Let this prayer rise from your heart today, not as an obligation, but as a declaration that your family still belongs to heaven, and you won't stop until they come home. If you've made it here, your soul is searching. That alone is holy, because most people don't take time to ask, "Am I praying the way heaven hears?" But you did, and that means Padre Pio is already walking with you, not to judge you, but to guide you. Not to shame your prayers, but to awaken them. He didn't become a saint by praying perfectly. He became a saint by praying truthfully, in pain, in silence, in total surrender. That's what he's inviting you into now. A life of prayer that reaches past the clouds and touches the heart of God. A life where you're not just speaking, but truly being heard. If this message stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Let it become a new beginning, a sacred turning point. Press like if your soul feels a little more alive now. Subscribe if you want to keep walking this path with us, because we are building a place where real prayer is taught, restored, and protected. And if there's someone you love who needs this message, someone who prays but feels far from God, share this with them. You might be the reason their soul wakes up too. Finally, type, "I'm not alone anymore" in the comments. That one sentence becomes a confession, a declaration, and a reminder. You are part of something greater. Padre Pio is with you, and we are too. In our next video, we will reveal one of the most urgent warnings Padre Pio ever gave, a hidden danger that may be sitting in your own home, blocking your spiritual life without you knowing it. Don't miss it. Your soul and your family's protection could depend on it. God bless you.